In the quiet heart of Mbale village, nestled between the whispering canopies of ancient iroko trees and the slow, winding river Omuta, lived a girl named Amara. She was only 12, but her laughter could lift the spirit of a mourning widow, and her curiosity often got her into places she was told not to go. Her eyes held a wild kind of innocence, the type found only in those who still believe in the power of stories. Amara's parents were not rich, but they were respected. Her mother, Mama Kemi, was known throughout the village for her herbal balms and soaps remedies passed down from her own mother and her mother before her. Her father, Baba Tunde, was the headmaster of the village school and one of the few men who could read and write in English and Swahili. Every night after dinner, he would sit Amara down beside the flickering fire and read aloud from old books, translated tales of ancient warriors and faraway lands. But Amara's heart belonged to the stories her grandmother, Nana Afua, told. "Oh, child," Nana would say, clicking her tongue as she rubbed palm oil on her knees. "The ancestors walk among us. The river spirits watch you. Even the wind knows your name if you listen closely." Amara believed her. She would sit cross-legged under the moonlight, listening to stories of shapeshifters, forest guardians, and the legendary pearl of Oduduwa, a treasure said to be gifted only to a girl with a heart as pure as morning rain. Amara believed, with all her heart, that she might find that pearl one day. She loved school. Her father made sure of it. While other children ran from lessons, Amara stayed back to sweep the classroom or help the younger ones pronounce new words. Her dream was simple, to become a teacher like Baba Tunde. "I'll wear glasses like you," she would giggle, pushing up her imaginary frames. "And I'll make all my pupils write essays about river spirits and magic pearls." Her family adored her. Her village cherished her. But fate has a way of placing storms in the path of those who shine too brightly. It was a Thursday. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the wind smelled of roasted yam and pawpaw. The village had just concluded the festival of New Harvest, and songs of thanks still lingered in the air. Amara, barefoot and beaming, was sent to fetch water from the stream that curled like a lazy snake behind the tall cassava fields. She waved to the old women pounding yam beneath mango trees and whistled a tune Nana Efua used to hum when she was young. She never returned. Mama Kemi began to worry after the sun dipped below the hills and the fireflies came out to dance. "She never takes this long," she muttered, pacing with the oil lamp in her hand. Baba Tunde, still in his reading robe, stood by the front porch, listening, hoping to hear the familiar laughter bouncing down the dirt path. They heard nothing. By midnight, the entire village was awake. Men with torches combed the forest trails, calling her name into the darkness. Women gathered by the riverbank, whispering prayers and offering kola nuts to the spirits. The priest of the shrine, Babanduka, was summoned. He closed his eyes and chanted into the wind, listening, listening. But even the spirits were silent that night. All they found was Amara's calabash bowl, cracked and empty, lying beside the river. The days that followed were like a slow death. Mama Kemi stopped speaking. Her hands, once busy with soap and herbs, trembled whenever she touched water. Baba Tunde resigned from the school. He spent his days at the edge of the cassava fields, staring down the path Amara had vanished on. And Nana Efua, she stopped telling stories altogether. "What tale do I tell when the best one has been stolen?" she asked once, tears silently cutting through the dust on her face. The village mourned. Some believed she was taken by spirits, Mami Wata, perhaps, angered by a broken promise. Others whispered darker things. There had been stories of traffickers from the city, coming in during harvest festivals when families were distracted, snatching children in plain sight. But no one had seen anything. There were no footprints. No screams, just the silence and the memory of a girl who once made the wind laugh. A small shrine was built near the river, where women left offerings, shells, tiny dolls, bits of cloth. "For Amara," they'd say, "so she knows we remember." And then, slowly, life moved on, as life cruelly does, but not for her family. Mama Kemi's hair turned gray far too early. Baba Tunde refused to speak about his daughter, even when asked. He just clutched her last report card, straight A's, and a smiley face drawn in red ink. "Smart girl," the teacher had written. "A teacher in the making." Years passed. The river kept flowing. Children grew up. But in one corner of Zawadi, time stood still. The trees still whispered Amara's name. And then, 12 years later, something happened. Something no one expected. But 12 years had passed since Amara vanished, and the village of Mbale had transformed like a tree after a long drought. Children born that year were now nearly grown. The river Omuta, once central to all village life, now flowed quietly, almost hesitantly, as if it too mourned. Mama Kimi and Baba Tundi were no longer the same. Their laughter had long dried up like cracked earth in Harmattan. Baba Tanda had become a recluse, only emerging to fetch water or buy bread. His once proud stride had wilted into a slow, dragging walk. Mama Kemi hardly ever left the house. She no longer made her soaps. Her hands, once so careful, trembled too much. But every year, on the day Amara disappeared, she still placed 3 cowries and a tiny doll by the shrine near the river. It was on one of those days, a muggy morning with air thick as porridge, that a stranger arrived in Mbale. She came on foot, barefoot, with a faded green cloth tied around her waist and a small bag slung across her shoulder. Her hair was cut short. Her eyes carried a kind of silence like someone who had screamed for years and found no one to hear her. Her skin was dark, smooth, but her arms bore faint scars, thin like threads, some healed, others still angry. The villagers watched as she walked into the center of the market square, asking quietly for a woman named Mama Kimi. At first, no one replied. They simply stared. The woman's voice was soft but cracked like old wood. Her accent was strange, as though she had learned to speak again only recently. She didn't blink much. She looked around as though everything was both familiar and unfamiliar at once. Then, an old woman, selling plantains under a wide straw hat, dropped her basket and screamed, "It's her, Amara, by the gods!" The market fell into stunned silence. Mama Kimi was inside, plucking bitterleaf when she heard the scream. Baba Tonda, seated by the window, rose slowly. His hand shook as he pulled aside the curtain. There, in front of the house, stood the girl they had buried in their hearts. Only, she was no longer a girl. Amara, if it was really her, stood frozen. Her lips quivered. Her eyes scanned the compound like someone returning to a dream. Mama Kimi stumbled forward, mouth agape, hand on her chest. "Amara," she whispered. The woman dropped to her knees. "Mama," she sobbed, "I came back." The reunion was not loud. It was not joyful in the way stories describe. It was quiet, aching, broken like rain falling on a parched grave. Baba Tunde could not even speak. He simply walked over, sat beside her, and wept like a child. But behind the embrace, behind the tears, came questions. Dark questions. Where had she been? Who had taken her? Why had she not returned sooner? Amara didn't answer, at least not right away. For 2 days, she slept. Mama Kimi sat by her bedside the whole time, gently oiling her feet, combing her short, uneven hair, and humming lullabies from years long gone. Baba Tunde kept guard by the door, machete beside him, not out of fear of danger, but out of the helpless instinct to protect what he had lost. When Amara finally woke up, she told her story, and it was not the story they had expected. She had been taken not by spirits, not by magic, but by men. Human beings, flesh and blood, heartless and cruel. She had gone to the river that day, just like she was told. But as she bent to scoop water into her bowl, 2 men emerged from the trees, grabbed her, and covered her mouth. She screamed once, only once. The rest of her voice had been stolen. She was taken far beyond the hills, beyond the cities, beyond even the country, she thought. For years, she had lived among strangers, doing work no child should do, in a house with no love, no light, no names. At first, she tried to escape. She was beaten. Then, she tried to scream. She was silenced. She forgot the sound of the river. She forgot the feel of her mother's hands. Her own name became a whisper she dared not say. Until one day, the house she was kept in was raided by government workers. A trafficking ring busted, children rescued, some reunited with families. Others too broken to speak. She spent years in a shelter in a foreign land. She was taught to read again, to speak again, to live again. And then, after 12 years, when her voice had started to return in fragments, someone brought her a map. "Where are you from?" they asked. "I'm from the place where the river sings," she said. And somehow that was enough. The NGO helped trace her roots. It took months, but eventually, someone connected the dots. A village near a river, a girl named Amara, a disappearance during the harvest festival. And so she returned, but she was no longer the Amara they had known. She was a woman carved by pain, pieced together with scars and survival. The village was divided. Some welcomed her back with praise and tears. Others whispered, "It can't be her," they said. 12 years? That's too long. Spirits don't return people like that. But the elder, Nana Afua, her grandmother, had only one thing to say. "I do not care if she walked through hell or across 7 rivers. That is my granddaughter, and her story is not over." But trouble had followed Amara. A man arrived the next week. He wore a dark suit and sunglasses. He was not from Mbale. He said he was looking for someone, a runaway, a missing worker. He had come for Amara. The village stood still once again. Who was this man? Why was he looking for her? And what would they do to protect her? The arrival of the man in the suit sent ripples across Mbale, like a stone cast into still water. His presence was wrong, too clean, too sharp, too silent. He arrived not in a cart, or barefoot like Amara, but in a black vehicle with tinted windows. It had rained the night before, yet not a speck of dust clung to his polished shoes. He introduced himself simply as Mr. Kojo, a representative from a company Amara had once been under care of. He came bearing papers, claiming to be acting on legal authority to retrieve her. "She's a missing person under our care," he said calmly to the village chief. "She escaped. We are simply bringing her home." The entire village had gathered under the great baobab tree for the meeting. Mr. Kojo stood like a statue among them, unfazed by the glares, the whispers, the rustling leaves above. Mama Kemi sat beside Amara, her hand tightly wrapped around her daughter's. Baba Tunde's machete rested behind his back, quiet but within reach. Amara's hands began to tremble. That man, that face, she knew it. He was one of them, not one of the men who had grabbed her at the river, but one who had come later. She remembered his voice, how it never raised, never broke, how he spoke with smiles but commanded fear. He had overseen the house she was kept in, the house that wasn't a house at all, but a prison made of clean walls and cruel rules. He used to pat her head like she was some pet, tell her she was lucky to have been chosen. She remembered him giving orders when the younger girls cried. Remembered how he watched them like property, not people. Her blood went cold. Now here he stood, dressed like a businessman, smiling with thin lips and steel eyes, calling her a missing asset. Chief Ekong, the village elder, did not speak for a while. He simply watched the man and then turned to Amara. "My child," he said gently, "do you know this man?" Amara's voice cracked like a dry stick. "Yes!" She stood up slowly, her legs shaky, but her gaze steady. "This man is not here to help. He's here to take me back into chains. For 12 years I was not cared for. I was owned. I was worked. I was beaten. I was silenced. They called it a home, but it was hell." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mama Kemi stood beside her daughter, her eyes burning. "You will not touch her," she said quietly, but firmly. Mr. Kojo didn't flinch. "She signed a rehabilitation contract. It's binding. Her memory may be fractured, but the documents don't lie." Baba Tundu stepped forward. "She was 13, he growled. "What contract does a child sign in captivity?" But Kojo remained calm. "Regardless of your emotional perspective, legally." "We are not in your city, Mr. Kojo," Chief Ekong interrupted, his voice low. "Here, law is not just ink on paper. It is spirit. It is truth." Kojo adjusted his cufflinks. "Then the truth is, I'll return with government support." He turned to leave, but not before looking at Amara one last time. "You think you've escaped, but you haven't. We don't lose our investments." The villagers gasped at that word investments. But Kojo didn't care. He stepped into his vehicle and vanished down the road, leaving a trail of dust and fear behind. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Her body had returned, but her past had followed her like a hungry hyena. She sat by the riverbank alone, the moonlight soft on the water, her thoughts loud in her head. She had run before. She could run again. But this time, the village wouldn't let her. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Women from all corners of the village began to arrive at her home. Young mothers, grandmothers, teenagers. Some brought food, others brought fabric. One brought a carved staff, said to belong to a hunter who had survived a lion attack. They sat around Amara in a silent circle of strength. "She is not alone," one woman said. "If they come for her again," said another, "they come for all of us." Soon, the men joined. Not just Babatundi, but farmers, hunters, even the once skeptical trader, Musa, who had doubted her identity. "If this is how the world treats our children," he said, "then maybe the world needs reminding who we are." Chief Ikong called a council. They would protect Amara not just with words, but with strategy. The elders sent messages to nearby villages. They informed the regional council. An advocate from a local justice group was invited. And Amara's story was recorded in her own voice, in her own words on tape, written on paper, and even chanted in the old dialect, so it would never be forgotten. But something else happened too. Amara began to transform. The quiet fear in her eyes began to harden into resolve. She no longer trembled when she walked. She no longer turned her head at every noise. She began to smile, small shy smiles that came and went like shooting stars. She helped her mother prepare shea butter again. She sat by her father and peeled cassava, slowly at first, then more confidently. She even returned to the river, not to mourn, but to stand on its edge, close her eyes, and listen. The river sang to her again. And in that moment, Amara understood something. She was not what had been done to her. She was what she chose to become next. But they all knew the battle wasn't over. Mr. Kojo would return. And when he did, the village of Mbale would be waiting. The dusty winds of Mbale stirred again. Not from weather, but from news. Mr. Kojo was coming back, and this time he wasn't alone. The village's scout, Obasi, spotted them from the hilltop. 2 black vehicles this time, with government insignias painted faintly on the side. They moved slowly, deliberately, like predators too confident to run. As Obasi rang the warning bell near the chief's hut, the village came alive. Women quickly gathered the children. Men pulled down machetes from above their doors, long unused but freshly sharpened. Elders took their places near the council ground. The energy was thick, not of panic, but of prepared defiance. Amara sat on the wooden bench outside Mama Kemi's hut. She didn't tremble this time. She wasn't that 13-year-old anymore. This was the day she had feared, dreamed of, and now was ready for. She wasn't alone. From the northern paths came a group of human rights advocates from the city, led by a bold, sharp-tongued woman named Nia Adichie. A native of the region, she had read Amara's recorded testimony and rushed to Mbale with a legal team, notebooks, cameras, and a will of iron. "Let them come," Nia said as she shook Amara's hand. "Let them try." The vehicles pulled into the village square as the sun reached its peak. Mr. Kojo stepped out, again too polished for the red soil of the land. But this time, he wasn't alone. A uniformed officer, a young woman, and a lawyer in city attire followed. The officer looked uncertain. The young woman from social services avoided direct eye contact. Only Kojo seemed untouched by nerves. Chief Ikong rose first. "You have returned," he said without welcome. "I said I would," Kojo replied. "We're here to enforce recovery of an individual unlawfully detained." "You mean Amara?" Nia interrupted. "The girl who was abducted from her home at 13, enslaved for 12 years, subjected to forced labor, trafficking, and abuse?" Kojo turned to her, surprised. "And you are?" "Nia Adichie, legal representative and advocate from the African Center for Justice. This young woman is not your asset. She is a survivor of a crime." The officer glanced sideways. "We were told she was mentally unstable, that she had wandered off, that the organization was her guardian." Mama Kimi stepped forward. "I am her mother, and she was stolen from me by men who looked just like him." She pointed at Kojo. She was a child. The young woman from social services whispered something to the officer, who now seemed unsure. Can we speak to her directly? Amara stepped forward. Not afraid, not shaking. She faced all of them, Kojo, the officer, the lawyer, with a voice that echoed across the square. My name is Amara Kemi. I was taken. I was locked away. I was told I was worthless, that my voice didn't matter, that I didn't belong to myself. But they were wrong. I belong here. And today, I tell my truth to your faces. She handed them a small packet. Photos of the place she was kept, letters she had written in secret, sketches she had drawn of the other girls. Nia provided more, transcripts, evidence, and audio files of testimony from others who had escaped. Kojo stepped forward, but this time it was the officer who raised a hand. Sir, I think we've been misinformed, the officer said. Kojo tried to protest, but it was too late. The power had shifted. The lawyer began flipping through the pages nervously. The young woman from social services began crying softly, and Mr. Kojo, the cold, collected man in the suit, finally cracked. He turned to the officer. You don't know who I work for. You don't understand what you're messing with. But Nia walked right up to him, fire in her voice. Oh, we understand perfectly, and we're not afraid of you. Within an hour, a formal investigation was opened. Kojo was asked not to leave the region. Nia filed for an immediate protective order for Amara and any other girls once held by the center he claimed to represent. Chief Ekong declared publicly that no one in Mbale would be handed over without due justice. And most powerfully, Amara was officially declared free, not just by the village, but by the law. The celebration that night was soft. Not loud drums and fire, but shared food, joined hands, and quiet weeping. Amara sat with Mama Kemi and Baba Tunde, surrounded by the villagers who once doubted her, now guarding her like a queen. She looked at Naya. Do you think it's really over? She asked. Nia smiled. It's not over, but you're no longer running. Now you're standing, and that makes all the difference. But Amara wasn't done. She asked to speak at the local council the following week, not just to share her story, but to demand action for other girls like her, the ones who didn't escape, the ones who never made it home, and the ones still out there, waiting for someone to believe them. The moon over Mbale shone brighter than it had in years, not because the skies were clearer, but because the village itself had changed. It had been weeks since Mr. Kojo's return, and the dramatic confrontation that followed. Since then, authorities had begun investigations across regions, uncovering similar charity shelters that hid trafficking networks beneath their banners. The truth had begun to rise like a flood, but none of it would have happened if one girl hadn't spoken. And that girl was Amara Kemi. She sat alone beneath the baobab tree outside her old childhood home. No longer a ruin, but now slowly being rebuilt by the village. Baba Tunda had organized volunteers to repair every brick, and the walls now rose like symbols of healing. Mama Kimi brought her a bowl of millet porridge and sat beside her. You've become taller than me, her mother said with a soft laugh. Amara smiled but didn't respond. Her eyes were on the horizon. I've spent so long hiding, she whispered, that I don't know what to do with peace. Mama Kemi held her hand gently. You speak now. You live now. That's what you do. The next morning, the villagers gathered around the council square once more. Not for a crisis, but for Amara's own public hearing. She stood before them in a flowing traditional wrapper, her hair braided neatly, her voice no longer shy. My name, she began, is Amara. It means grace, and I am here because I believe we must become a village that listens, especially to the quiet ones. The crowd was still. She continued, there are many girls like me. Some you know, some you never will. And they carry wounds not on their skin, but in their hearts. Wounds made from silence. She paused. I will not be silent anymore. Cheers erupted. Not wild, but deep. It was the sound of people not just clapping, but awakening. Chief Ekong stood and stepped forward. From this day forward, he declared, no child will vanish from Mbale without this council rising to their defense. We were blind before. We will not be again. Amara's story spread beyond the village. News outlets came. Advocacy groups reached out. She received an invitation to speak in the capital, then abroad. Her name began appearing in newsletters, radio interviews, and youth protection campaigns. But Amara didn't just want to be a face on a poster. She returned to Mbale with a vision, a center for healing, run by survivors, for girls like her. With Nia's help, land was granted, funds raised, and plans drawn. The center would be called Light After Rain. It would offer shelter, therapy, education, and most of all, a place where no girl had to prove she mattered. She just did. One day, a young girl named Simi arrived, found abandoned near a border village. She had no name, no voice, and eyes that had seen too much. Amara welcomed her personally. Simi clung to her silently at first, just like Amara had once clung to her silence. But slowly, day by day, she began to draw, to laugh, to sing faintly. And one night, as the two sat under the same baobab tree Amara once cried beneath, Simi whispered, "Are you my mother?" Amara smiled. "I'm not your mother," she said, hugging her gently. "But I am your sister, and you are home." Years passed, and Light After Rain became a beacon across the region. Girls who had disappeared returned. Communities began reporting suspicious organizations. Trafficking rings were disrupted. And at the heart of it all was one voice, a voice that once trembled, now teaching others to roar. Amara never forgot the pain, but she used it as fire. Her story, born in the silence of captivity, ended not in despair, but in transformation. She wasn't a victim. She was a warrior of light. Final scene. A classroom in Mbale. A chalkboard reads, "Storytelling as Resistance." Amara stands before a group of young girls, telling a tale. It's not her story this time. It's a folk tale, full of clever animals and brave daughters. The girls laugh, draw, ask questions. She ends with a question. "What does your name mean?" One by one, the girls answer. Hope. Victory. River? Dream. And finally, a shy girl in the corner, looking down, says, "Amara." Amara kneels down. "Then you are a blessing," she whispers, because now the name Amara no longer meant pain. It meant possibility. It meant power. It meant never again.